Drainage is one of, if not the primary concern of the citizens of Jefferson Parish. We in Jefferson Parish government want you to know that it is for us too. Like you, we are residents of the parish, and our families live, work, go to school, and enjoy the many activities and events available in Jefferson Parish. So we too depend on our drainage system to protect the lives and property of our families. In this video, we will discuss the characteristics of our parish drainage system and inform you of some of the many improvements to our levees, canals, ditches, and pump stations that have been completed in recent years. You'll also hear about ongoing drainage systems improvement and our plans for improvements into the future. The Jefferson Parish drainage system is a very unique and intricate system consisting of levees, piping, ditches, canals, and pump stations. The need for such an intricate system is a result of our unique topography. Much of our parish is below sea level. We are also practically surrounded by water: Lake Pontchartrain, the Mississippi River, the Gulf of Mexico, bayous, and estuaries.
What we have had to do over the years to overcome, the ground elevation and being below sea level, to build a system of levees, flood walls, canals, and drainage pump station, which all together provide flood protection to citizens of Jefferson Parish.
Very few communities worldwide have similar topography such as ours, where every drop of water that falls within our leveed areas has to be pumped out. Because we are surrounded by water, our levees are necessary to prevent constant flooding from high river elevations and from tidal surges from Lake Pontchartrain and the Gulf. Every drop of water that falls in Jefferson Parish eventually has to be pumped over the levees that surround us. So our pump stations are the heart of our drainage system.
Once a rain event occurs, the water flows into canals. At predetermined levels, the operators at each of the stations starts pumps. They do not want to pump the canals down too quickly, causing bank failures and erosion. So the pumps are started in stages, and at each stage is attained, more pumps are started until eventually during a heavy rainfall, we would have all pumps operating.
One thing we need to keep in mind, even with the pumps working at the full capacity, there is still potential for street flooding because an intense rain event can overwhelm the system by exceeding the system's capacities.
Until 1981, parish drainage components were designed for a 2-year storm, or a storm that has a 50% chance of occurring every year. This was equivalent to about 6 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. In 1981, when it was determined that storms exceeding this intensity were occurring more frequently, the design requirement was increased to a 10-year storm, or a storm that has a 10% probability of occurring in a given year. This is equivalent to about 9¼ inches of rain in a 24-hour period. Because much of the existing populated areas of the parish were developed prior to 1981, there is a corresponding amount of drain lines that are undersized by today's design standards. While these pipes are adequate for the majority of rain events we experience, there are several storms every year where severe street flooding occurs, and on some occasions, house flooding in low-lying areas. In recent years, approximately $98 million of federal, state, and local funding has been spent improving neighborhood drainage. Currently, these improvements are focused on low-lying areas where repetitive house flooding and/or severe street flooding is prevalent. These projects are replacing or supplementing older, smaller drain lines and increasing the sizes of outfall pipes to the canals. Canals and ditches convey water from interior drainage networks to the pump stations. In the past 15 years, approximately $578 million of federal, state, and local funds have been spent on canal and ditch improvement projects. Major canals on both the east and west banks of the parish have been and are still being widened and fortified under the Southeast Louisiana Urban Flood Control Program, or SELA. Our levee system incorporates earthen berms, concrete, and steel flood walls, and combinations of the two. In recent years, over $770 million have been spent to raise and strengthen our levees on the east and west banks of Jefferson Parish. As a result, the levee system now provides an unprecedented level of protection for our area. Levee heights have been increased to their originally authorized elevations and have been fortified to provide protection against a 100-year chance storm, or a storm that has a 1% probability of occurring in a given year. Rainwater that falls is collected by neighborhood street catch basins and underground pipes. From there, it flows by gravity to larger collector pipes and ditches, then to larger canals which flow to pump stations. The pump stations then pump the water over the levees into bordering lakes and bayous. There are 6 major or front-line pump stations on the East Bank and 18 on the West Bank. The East Bank also has 11 internal pump or lift stations that assist water in getting to the front-line stations. The West Bank also includes stations throughout the Crown Point and Lafitte areas.
You can visualize an Olympic-sized swimming pool. If all the pumps in Jefferson Parish are running, it can drain one Olympic-sized swimming pool and another half of an Olympic-sized swimming pool in 1 second. That is about 253,000 gallons that we can drain in 1 second. What people may not know is actual cost to build and maintain a pump stations. One pump unit is going to cost about approximately $2 million. That expenditure includes the drive unit, either is electric motor or a diesel engine, a gearbox. Let's say you have pump station with 7 pumps in it. That's about $14 million just for the pump units. Plus you got the building and other equipments that goes in the pump station. As a whole, one pump station with 7 pumps usually costs a total of $35 to $40 million. When you look at the overall flood protection system in Jefferson Parish, it's pretty amazing that how over the years this system has evolved. It started over 100 years ago with one station and one man's dream, and a century later it has evolved into a sophisticated pumping system.
The first pumps in Jefferson Parish were horizontal pumps at the Hero pump stations, which dates back to 1913 and 1914. Hero pump station was built by Mr. Hero with the express purpose of draining the land so he could start developing properties on the West Bank of Jefferson Parish. In order to put that land in commerce, he had to drain it. There was no way to drain it because the land is below sea level, so it could not gravity flow, and hence the need for pumps. The Hero pump station was built, and it was built to house 2 of Baldwin Wood's pumps. Alvin Baldwin Woods was a young engineer out of Tulane University who went to work for the Surgeon Water Board in the early 1900s. But his most famous invention was the wood screw pump. One of the unique features of the Baldwin Woods' pump was the fact that he put a maintenance tunnel into the interior part of the pump into the submarine housing. A workman can actually go into the housing while the pump is pumping water to check the grease and the bearings and to adjust his packing. The same 2 pumps are still in use today. The engines have been changed twice at least, but the actual pump is still in service. It's been checked regularly and it's still in excellent condition.
As we have moved into the 21st century, so has our pumping capacity. Each station has a different number of pumps. The number starts from 3 to 10. Jefferson Parish has 2 different types of pumps. One is vertical pumps and the other one is horizontal pumps. And usually in the stations you have combination of both that gives you the flexibility to pump at different rates.
A horizontal pump, generally speaking, means that the shaft of that pump is in a horizontal configuration. The horizontal pumps cannot self-prime. They require a vacuum because on a standard horizontal pump, the impeller in the shaft stands above water, which makes the maintenance a lot easier and it increases the longevity of the pump. But because of that feature, it's necessary to bring the water to the impeller. Vertical pumps, on the other hand, the shaft is generally in a vertical configuration and that the impeller is submerged below the water at all times. Most vertical pumps will self-prime. When that pump starts turning, it can almost immediately start pumping water. Therefore, they can come online a lot quicker than the horizontal pumps can. The sequence of pump operation inside a pump station would depend upon the levels in the suction canal. At a predetermined elevation, the operator will start his first pumps, which are generally the smaller vertical pumps. As the canal level continues to rise, the operator would continue bringing vertical pumps online. When it got to a stage that all of his vertical pumps were running and the canal still rose, then he would crank the horizontal pumps. And it's still increasing his pumping capacity in stages so as not to destabilize the banks of the canal. This is a typical vertical pump that would be used in Jefferson Parish and in other locations. We start the lowermost part of the pump would be a suction bell. What the suction bell does is it receives the water as it's drawn into the pump and helps direct it toward the impeller. The next section that you're looking at, the green section, would be the impeller. This rotates, forcing the water upward. Above it are some diffuser sections which straighten out the flow of the water to take the turbulence out of it and make it a uniform flow. This line shaft, this area here, is what connects the impeller to its driver. It has a series of bearings and packings, and it transmits the power to turn the impeller. The upper section here is the discharge head, and the discharge head actually directs the water out to the discharge through the tubes. This purplish area would be called the discharge head of the pump, and what it does is it changes the direction of the water from the vertical to the horizontal, which then goes out to this brown area, which is the transition piece to go to the discharge tubes. This is the horizontal pump. The brown section, which is on the suction side, which would draw its water from the canal. This piece is a transition that goes from the concrete suction tube to attach it to the pump. The gray area is just the pump body. The purplish blue area would be the drive shaft for the impeller. The impeller sits inside of its impeller cone, this green area being the impeller. The impeller, once the pump is primed, would then create the force which drives the water out through the rest of the pump housing and into the concrete discharge tube. We're now inside an 11-foot diameter Alice Chalmers TT custom-built pump. This pump has an 11-foot diameter, four-bladed propeller, and in front of that is diffuser vanes to straighten out the flow of the water. Inside of this housing is an oil bath roller bearing which supports the back end weight of the shaft and the impeller. The pump is primed, the water is lifted up to the level of this impeller from the suction canal. When the prime is achieved, this tube will be entirely filled with water and it will be pumped out to the discharge basin. This configuration would be very similar to the propeller and shaft on a ship. And instead of thrusting forward, it actually pushes the water instead of moving the vessel. When the water leaves the blades of this pump, it enters into this round section, which transitions into a rectangle. Behind us, it slopes up to the high point, which would be a flood protection. And when it leaves the high point, the tube increases in size to reduce the velocity of the water so that we don't scour out the discharge basin.
The drive or the power source of the pumps are either electric motor or the diesel engines. The electric motor is used mainly for the vertical pumps, and the diesel engines are used mainly for the horizontal pumps. The diesel engines are like locomotives engines. These train engines are reliable and can handle stress that is put on them at all times. Diesel engines are used mainly on the horizontal pumps.
It was chosen basically because it is a standard off-the-shelf model, requires no special parts. Plenty of people around that can service these engines. They're very popular in push boats on the Mississippi River. It's basically a two-stroke cycle engine, approximately 3,400 horsepower at 900 RPMs. Diesel fueled, air started so that we don't have to worry about batteries. We have a pre-lube pump and an oil circulating pump. They can keep this engine at about 120 degrees so that when it's started in an emergency, it can go to full power with no damage to the engine. This engine has a control panel. When the engine is started, automatically a series of events takes place which prelubes the pump, does a little diagnostic work, and takes approximately 3 minutes before the engine would actually be started. It opens up some various solenoid valves that brings cooling water and lubricating water to the pumps. The engine would then start and come up to an idle.
The critical issue to have the pumps continuous running is the debris and the trash at these stations. So it's very critical to, have as less trash dumped into the canal system and the waterways, and also into the subsurface drainage system.
All of these pumps are protected by flat galvanized steel bars, which are approximately 3.5 inches apart. This precludes any large debris from getting into the pump, which could damage the pump impeller or its mechanisms. The older type screen used in Jefferson Parish is called a catenary rake, which is an endless chain with raking devices on them. It scrapes the trash off of the screen in front of the pump and deposits it on the top of the trash bridge. The new style climber screens are a device that actually travels up and down the screen, deposits the trash on the bridge itself. During a hurricane season, because you can have high winds, any manner of debris, lumber, hot water heaters, automobile tires still mounted on the rim, any type of debris can come down these canals and have to be removed so that the screens can be kept open. Generally, the trash that's recovered at these stations and removed will be grass, different types of vegetation, a lot of trash which has floated into the canals either through high water or from people dumping debris into the canals or on canal banks. A lot of people take the grass from their lawns and dump them into the drainage system or blow them out onto the streets, which winds up into the drainage systems. All of these different types of debris tend to clog the screens and cause problems.
I cannot emphasize enough that the canal system in Jefferson Parish got to be free of debris, especially the large debris. Once the pumps are on and the suction, it creates a suction that everything moves to the pump stations. And there is a potential, once you get the big object, like a tire, or that can get into the suction of the pump, and it stops that pump from operating.
Jefferson Parish has made many improvements to our drainage system, levees, canals, and pump stations, and will continue to work hard toward better ways of protecting lives and property and providing an even better quality of life for all our citizens in Jefferson Parish.